Okay, so today is 4.8, solving inequalities, variable on one side, and graph. So when you solve, you're still using those old steps that we've been talking about. You're still gonna use the parentheses first, then you'll check for like terms, then you'll check if the variable is on one side, and if not, you gotta move it, and the math stuff is still the same. And then last step 2, you're gonna isolate the variable, which means you add or subtract to move the constant first, so that's the number with but not attached to the variable, and then you are going to get rid of the coefficient last, so you either multiply or divide it away, and that's the number attached to the variable. But as you see me covering right here, there's a little bit extra with this last step. So in the last step, you will flip your inequality if it is a negative. In this last step, if you have a negative that you will multiply or divide for the coefficient, then you will be flipping around that sign. So let's do some examples here. If you want to take a moment to write this out, totally fine. But again, make sure it is your last step that you be doing this flipping. So let's look at number 5 here. So I have negative 58 is greater than negative 6a minus 4. I have no parentheses. There are no like terms. The variable is already just on one side. So now I need to move the constant. And remember that minus 4 is the constant, so I got to get rid of it first. So I add 4 on both sides, because what you do on one side, you do on the other. We're left with negative 6a. My inequality goes on the equal bar. And then negative 58 plus 4 is a negative 54. Now I have to get rid of this negative 6, all right? And it's the very last thing I'm doing, and I have to divide it away. And because I am dividing a negative 6, I have to flip because we are dividing that negative 6. So I'm gonna cross out the negative 6's here, and I'm gonna flip this inequality right away just so I don't forget. I still have that a left over, and then in my calculator, I can check negative 54 divided by negative 6, and that gives me a positive 9. So my final answer is 9 is less than a. Now, I'm gonna graph this as well. So when I graph this, I know I'm gonna be a 9 with an open dot because we have no half equal sign and we have the number 9. But now I'm gonna look at my a. My a has the mouth open to it, so my a is bigger. So that means I'm gonna shade the bigger side, and the bigger side is always to the right. So I'm gonna shade to the right. All right, so that's why we had that day of focusing on graphing. So number 7, v over negative 5 minus 6 is less than or equal to negative 8. There is no parentheses. There are no like terms here. The variable is on one side. We just have the one v. And so now it's time to isolate. So I'm gonna add that 6 because it's my constant, and what I do on one side, I do on the other. This leaves me with v over negative 5. Nothing has flipped, so the inequality stays how it looks. And then negative 6 plus 8 is negative 2. I am dividing by a negative 5. That's what this fraction bar means. So I have to do the opposite and multiply by negative 5. And what you do on one side, you do on the other. So we are multiplying by a negative 5. So we are going to flip our inequality. So it is no longer going to be opening to the right. We're going to open it the other way here. So I'm flipping it around. This is what I mean by flip. And these cancel out. I'm left with that v. Negative 2 times negative 5 is a positive 10. So I'm going to write my final answer over on the side here. So this is my final answer. I'm going to graph it real quick. So I'm going to have a closed dot at 10. My v over here is the bigger number. So I'm going to shade the bigger side, which is always to the right. And that works out. Let's flip to the back. All right, number 12, we have 6m minus 4 minus 3 is greater than or equal to 5. So I have no parentheses, but I do have like terms. Negative 4 and negative 3 are like terms, so I'm going to add those together, and that gives me a negative 7. Everything else gets dropped down, keeping your inequality on that equal bar there. Then I'm going to add that 7 on both sides because it's the constant. This leaves us with 6m is greater than or equal to 12. All right, I got to get rid of this 6, so I have to divide it on both sides. We do not flip this time because this was a positive 6 here. So we do not flip because that was a positive 6. So that means I still have M. My symbol does not flip around, so it's still the same direction. And then 12 divided by 6 is 2. So my final answer, I'm going to write it over here on the side, is M is greater than or equal to 2. So when I graph this, I'm going to have a closed dot. Again, make it obvious. This is a 2. My M, the mouth opens to the M, so the M is bigger, which means we need to shade the bigger side, which is always to the right. Let's look at number 14 here. So I have parentheses, so I need to distribute that -3. -3 times 1 is a -3. -3 times a positive 4n is a -12n. Nothing else was messed with, so we drop everything else down, keeping that inequality on the equal bar. I have no like terms. My variable is only on the one side here, so now I have to move the constant, which is -3. So I got to add that 3 on both sides. This leaves me with -72. The inequality doesn't change, and then a -12n. I got to get rid of the -12 with my n. It's got secret multiplication here, so I have to do division with my fraction bar. And we are going to flip the inequality this time because we are dividing by a -12. So I'm going to flip. We're left with n and a 6. So I'm going to rewrite my final answer over on the side here. And now I need to graph this. So we're going to have an open dot, make it obvious at 6. My n is got the mouth open to it, so it's the bigger number, which means we need to shade the bigger side. Now, all of these examples just so happen to be shading to the bigger side, but it will not always be shading to the bigger side. So just be aware of where the mouth is facing on the variable. You use the variable to determine if you shade to the bigger side like these ones, or if the variable is the smaller, then you shade to the smaller side, okay? All right, that's the end of this video. So I'm sure your teacher will do a couple more with you if you need it, but the rest is all you.